In a group that many know as the cartoon reviewing community, one thing unites many of its residents. They're all pretty unathletic. But now, 5 nearly unrelated reviewers have decided to take a stand against this stereotype that is definitely a thing, and not just something I made up. But instead of being active by going to a gym or even going outside, they're changing the game the only way they know how. Through a set of 5 reviews and top 10 lists talking about their favorite sports-related cartoons, with a new video being released every weekday. It's Nintendo, C.R. Martin, Gem Reviews, Shadow Streak, and Cosmodor in Toon Sports Week, the event that no one asked for, but we're doing anyway. Hello everyone, Nintendo here, and welcome to my coverage of this week-long event. We'll be kicking things off by looking at one of the most popular sports covered in animation, bowling. As a sport, bowling doesn't get a ton of attention, likely because it's one of the most simple ones out there. I mean, you roll the ball down a lane and then try to strike the pins down. That's like the entire game right there. But the simplicity of the sport is what makes it perfect for the focus of a plot of a random TV show episode. You don't really have to go out of your way to explain how the sport works. You just need to set the teams up and then get things rolling. Some might call this a lazy plot device, but I call it a lazy plot device that has led to a bunch of fun episodes. I'm ranking the episodes on this list based on how much they capture the fun and excitement of bowling, since this isn't my top 10 cartoon episodes that have something to do with bowling for like 5 minutes. If for whatever reason you have a favorite bowling episode and it isn't on this list, then it's probably because it didn't have enough bowling in it, or it was mainly focused on something else. And if for whatever reason your favorite bowling-related animated thing is Out Bowling the movie The Great North Pole Elf Strike, sorry to disappoint you, but it isn't on the list. Oh no, why did I say that? Now everyone is going to dislike the video!
Nice throw! That was amazing!
This one is interesting because it's one of the few bowling episodes out there that doesn't feature the bowling alley as its main setting. Instead, the whole town of Danville becomes a bowling alley when Candace gets trapped inside a giant bowling ball made by her brothers and is hurled around town inside it. Meanwhile, Ancient P has to stop Dr. Doofenshmirtz's new diabolical and convoluted evil plan.
The first cup will be free, of course, but then the second will also be free, but then the third will cost $1 million! That way I only have to sell 3, and I will already be a millionaire.
This is a pretty standard Phineas and Ferb episode. The plot is pretty simple, and the song sounds like a quarter of the other songs from the show. A big part of the episode involves the main cast using their city to fling the giant bowling ball around and create the world's largest game of pinball. It leads to a creative musical sequence, but it's a little overly cruel to Candace, as the characters don't even attempt to break her out of the ball during the game, despite knowing that she's in it. That little detail doesn't break the episode though. On the plus side, it does have a decently touching and satisfying conclusion, as well as a few good jokes and a great doof monologue, but all in all, Bowlerama Drama isn't much of a bowling episode, and is generally just another Phineas and Ferb episode. Just another episode that is somewhat held back by being so faithful to the series formula.
It's one big bowling ball, Bob.
You betcha, Barry.
Nice throw!
All right, son. Now remember what I taught you.
You got it, Dad.
Want some help rolling the ball?
Sure do.
So this is the first episode of American Dad that I have ever seen, and as far as shows created by Seth MacFarlane go, this one seems to be pretty good. I don't know if I really want to watch more. I'm not in love with the animation style and some of the humor, but at least with this episode, they managed to have some decent comedy and be a little heartwarming, or at least as heartwarming as an episode where a father stabs his son can be. While attempting to bond with his son, Stan finds out that Steve is a pretty good bowler. To nurture his gift, Steve ends up taking lessons with a bowling teacher who I can't remember a single thing about, a decision that both are hesitant about, and the one that leads to Stan stabbing Steve, though Stan is called out for his actions later on. Despite its frequent black comedy, the episode still manages to build a touching moment between Stan and his son. It's built on miscommunication, which is a trope that I kind of despise, but it's handled subtly enough that I don't mind it. The episode is also the only one that I've seen that makes fun of the little animations some bowling alleys have after you roll your ball, so for me it also gets points there.
I wanted things to go back to how they were when it was just you and me having fun.
That's what I wanted.
It was? Is that why you were acting so weird?
Weird? How?
Stabbing me comes to mind!
Nice throw!
Look at his shoes. Look at all the lanes. Look how hilarious.
Clarence is a show that I haven't seen a lot of for a while, but I do know that many of its early episodes from its first season or so are very meh. The Big PD Pizza Problem is an episode that kind of falls into that trap, though it's got enough creative humor and creative bowling-related humor to warrant a spot on this list. Jeff is holding his birthday party at Pete's Bowling, but things go awry when Gilbin's party draws attention away from his, causing Jeff to eventually snap, but more importantly, bowl a strike. This episode covers nearly all of its bases, or should I say, strikes down all of its pins, with how it uses its setting. I like the jokes about the different shoe sizes, the random Big Lebowski reference, and how a major conflict of the episode is whether to put the bumpers in the lanes up or not.
I heard that playing with bumpers is just as hard as playing without them. Says who? My uncle. He made bumpers. He invented bumpers. You believe me, right?
Jeff reaching his breaking point isn't as entertaining as you think it would be with him being such a prim and proper character, but the episode picks up the slack by giving a starring role to Gilbin, this kid who never moves a muscle and whose speech sounds like wind blowing. He's such a hilariously bizarre character, and his fight with Jeff is the highlight of the episode.
There can only be one birthday! You get that one for free!
Coach Wittenberg, Gerald and I want to enter the bowling tournament, but we need a coach.
A coaching job? Are you kidding? Me?
Boys! The honorarium would be all mine!
Coach Wittenberg isn't the most hilarious bowling episode, and it's pretty simple all things considered, but I actually think its simplicity makes it stronger. It follows Hey Arnold's classic formula of Arnold helping someone down on their luck overcome a problem and get back on their feet. In this case, he helps his former rec basketball coach from a previous episode by having him coach his new bowling team. At first, Coach Wittenberg gives little encouragement and punishes failure with push-ups. But once Arnold influences him to use psychology in his coaching, the team goes from rolling gutter balls to rolling strikes in almost an instant.
I'm especially fond of strained beats.
Well, you're a unique individual, Red. All right. From now on, I want you to forget about bowling and trying to win. The only thing I want you to think about is strained beats.
Strained beats. Strained beats.
Normally, I would complain about the quick turnaround time for the team between their failure and success, but it helps show how important understanding the student's perspective can be to a teacher. It helps spread this positive message while not shoving it in the viewer's face. Arnold even presents his suggestion for Coach Wittenberg to change his teaching tactics and also just lighten up in a very passive way, making it even more surprising when the tactic manages to save both the team and Wittenberg's marriage. It wouldn't quite be an episode of Hey Arnold if a little bit of help didn't go a long way.
Hey, Coach.
Attention bowlers, the O-Town Bowlerama Amateur League Championship game will now begin. It's Big Heads Gutter Gals versus the losers.
Rocco is a show that manages to be really funny and enjoyable, while also being very harsh to its relatable main character. But in the episode Gutter Balls, the misery is handed off to Rocco's sour neighbor, Mr. Big Head. Through coaching his wife's bowling team, Big Head is given a chance to redeem himself for failing to strike down one singular pin at the end of his bowling championship match. This episode is set up to get the audience to sympathize with Mr. Big Head, but after we see how selfishly he treats his wife and her friends, and how he tries to sabotage Rocco's innocent team, you understand why things turned out the way they did for Mr. Big Head. The gags in this episode don't really come from spoofs of various objects and annoyances that you would find in the bowling alley, but instead the different ways the characters fail and succeed in bowling in both major and minor ways. This isn't the funniest Rocco episode out there, but the focus on Mr. Big Head desperately trying to fix the biggest mistake of his past gives this episode a unique edge.
Hello? What?
That's right. We quit the league and joined a monastery. We've even taken a vow of silence. Oops.
One pin, 2 pins, 3 pins, 4 pins, 5 pins, 6 pins, 7 pins, 8 pins. Come on, let me say 9 and 10. Yes!
I don't remember much about the Mighty Bee, except for that it was a very weird show. One of the first cartoons I ever saw that really weirded me out. This was at a time when Nickelodeon's only other prominent cartoons were the Fairly OddParents and SpongeBob, so seeing a cartoon with such bizarre animation and intense gross-out humor kind of turned me off. The style of humor isn't the most memorable, but from the little I've seen of it, I'd say that the Mighty Bee is a pretty good show if you can get around how strange it can be. And it has a pretty good bowling episode to boot, which is very important when judging the quality of any cartoon. Whenever Bessie bowls, she can only manage to bowl a 7-10 split. So to fix her situation, she has a trippy soul-searching dream where she finds out that the reason she can only bowl 7-10 splits is because when she was a baby, someone used her as a bowling ball and knocks out all of Bessie's teeth, except for one in both the left and rightmost corners of her mouth. Definitely a deep and compelling backstory for sure. The Mighty Bee has a fantastic art style, and this episode really plays to that strength with dozens of varied and very fluidly animated visual gags, especially in the dream sequences. I almost want to watch more of the show just to look at it. If there's any problem with this episode, it's that it doesn't have a ton of substance outside of being a string of really great jokes. But if you enjoy bouncy, fast-paced cartoons, check this episode and this show out.
She's taking her time?
Just really taking her time.
This is going to be a long night.
Speaking of good cartoons that need more love, here's an episode from the Looney Tunes show. A reboot that plopped classic cartoon characters into a sitcom environment and still managed to be very enjoyable and well written. If you're looking for a hearty dose of slapstick, you won't find it here. But I think that this was a great show in its own right, and really didn't deserve to be canned after only 2 seasons. Daffy was one of the best characters on the show to watch because his brand of stupidity hit bullseyes nearly every time he showed up. And To Bowl or Not to Bowl is a great episode that puts the spotlight on him. Daffy's position as the man, or I guess the dude in this scenario, among his chums at the bowling alley is put in jeopardy when Bugs accidentally stumbles upon his team practicing. To make matters worse, Porky, one of the members of the team, is hospitalized. Naturally because of Daffy, and Bugs has to fill in for Porky so his team can beat Daffy's one-dimensional nemesis Terry in the championship. This episode has a great mix between bowling and character-centered gags, and it helps give it a great amount of variety. I love how this episode manages to create a legitimate conflict between Bugs and Daffy, with Bugs interfering with Daffy's social life, yet it still manages to be very funny all the way through. It's kind of like Space Jam with bowling, but if it wasn't just a really long commercial with bad acting and writing.
What are these guys?
Well, remember the tiny aliens I told you about?
Oh.
The ending to this episode is especially fantastic. Compared to the endings of nearly all the other bowling episodes that I've seen, this is a great change of pace, and I love how it builds up suspense that leads to an ending that may not be completely satisfying for all the characters, but it sure is funny.
All right, team. Now, if we're gonna win the tournament this year, we're gonna have to step up our game.
This is the only episode on this list that I can say was a bit of a turning point for one of its characters. Skips from regular show was always a bit of the odd man out compared to the other characters in the main cast, which were a lot louder and seemed to be a lot more simple. At this point in the series, we already knew that he was immoral, but here we get the first hints that he has some kind of a secret past. But even beyond that, Skip Strikes is a great episode. Mordecai, Rigby, Skips, and Benson's bowling team, the Park Strikers, just have to beat the team The Magical Elements in order to win their league's championship, literally putting the Strikers up against Death himself. Death even threatens Skips to sit the game out or else have his secret from his past be revealed. Skips quits the team in fear, but after realizing that his friends need him, he returns, leading to a super satisfying ending. Yeah, a lot of these bowling episodes have those. One thing I have to commend this episode for is making the escalation of the bowling game feel natural. Some regular show episodes struggle a bit with taking a regular problem and making it more of a supernatural problem. Sometimes the transition from one kind of problem to another can go by very quickly and feel somewhat jarring, but since the conflict here involves the characters going up against a team called the Magical Elements, the transition makes sense and helps give the episode a great sense of gradual rising tension. With how much the characters of regular show disagree each episode, it's easy to forget that at the end of the day, everyone working at the park are still friends. There aren't too many other episodes where Benson, Mordecai, and Rigby are all on the same team, and the whole episode reminds you how strong the bond between these guys are, and it never once feels forced or out of character.
Wait! Look! Yes!
Deciding which episode of The Simpsons to put on this list was hard. There's 4 different episodes that revolve around bowling. Team Homer is a classic episode with tons of great moments, but its subplot doesn't have much to do with bowling. The episode Singin' in the Lane, which aired only a few months ago, is an average episode that tries and fails to be as good as Team Homer, and Hello Gutter, Hello Fatter is all over the place.
Kids, turn off the TV. I have some bad news about Lenny.
Not Lenny!
Act 1 ends with Homer bowling a perfect game, Act 2 ends with Homer accidentally attempting to commit suicide, and Act 3 ends with Maggie saving Homer from drowning. Would you believe that this type of storytelling used to be the norm for The Simpsons? By process of elimination, you can figure out that Life in the Fast Lane is the episode that makes the list. When Homer gets Marge a bowling ball meant for himself for her birthday, he uses it to go bowling on her own. She is soon taken under the wing of the bowling instructor Jacques, who tries to woo her while teaching her how to bowl. There's some strong bowling-themed content in this episode, with a wild dream sequence towards the end that has a fantastic color palette and some creative bowling-themed designs, and no other episode gets as intimate about the sport as this one does. But before you know it, Marge and Jacques' relationship turns into an affair, and this bowling episode gets real. The entire family is confused about what to do. Marge doesn't know what she's getting herself into, Homer doesn't know the first thing about how to properly handle the situation, and Bart and Lisa can do nothing but watch as the whole thing plays out. The episode doesn't make either Homer or Marge out to be the villain. Homer's acts at the start of the episode are questionable, but they aren't enough to justify the stress that Marge puts onto Homer as the episode goes along. There's very few jokes in the scenes that the pair share, and it makes the episode so much more intense than the average Simpsons episode where Homer and Marge's marriage is put to the test. Life on the Fast Lane was the 9th episode of the entire series, and since it comes from the roughest era in the show's history, you can tell that the crew was still trying to figure out how to write the show. If this episode were made in seasons 5 or 6, or even today, I can assure you that there would be many more gags than there were here. Because so much of the episode is played straight, rather than with constant splashes of comedy, it's easy to take its drama very seriously, and it makes the episode a lot more interesting than some of the funniest Simpsons episodes. However, don't get the idea that this episode is completely bare of humor. In fact, Albert Brooks gives a phenomenal performance as Jacques. I dare say that it's the best performance he has ever done for the show. He makes a character who is honestly kind of a creep so charming, and every line he says is pure gold. It honestly becomes a bit understandable why Marge fell for him so quickly in the first place. He manages to even make talking about brunch sexy.
Meet me tomorrow for brunch.
What's brunch?
You'd love it. It's not quite breakfast. It's not quite lunch, but it comes with a slice of cantaloupe at the end. You don't get completely what you would at breakfast, but you get a good meal.
Technically speaking, this is the best episode on this list. It's still got problems that other Season 1 Simpsons episodes have, like lacking background design and scenes that are a bit boring, but it executes its conflict so well that I can overlook any minor problems with it. In fact, the drama in this episode is so good that it almost overshadows the bowling aspect. Yes, I know that that's a bit of a picky reason to keep the episode from taking the #1 slot, but that's not to discredit it in any way. Life on the Fast Lane was one of the first Simpsons episodes to be more than what you would expect from your average cartoon or your average sitcom. It may seem different from what The Simpsons is known as now, but it helped define the show and its single most important relationship. It should be remembered as not only one of the best bowling episodes, but also one of the best Simpsons episodes.
Goodbye, my wife.
Goodbye, Homer.
Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends gets a lot of crap for having some bad episodes and also having a main character who can occasionally be annoying, but a lot of people forget how many really funny episodes it had. I'm not quite sure how The Big Lebowski ranks among my favorite episodes of the series, but the episode itself is fantastic. This one is a really great character showcase, as every main character present in this episode gets their moment to shine. Not only is Foster's Home one of the funniest cartoons on this list, but the show was written well enough that its cast of characters could be fun to watch no matter what situation or location they were put into. And that's the reason why I enjoyed watching this episode more than all the others on this list. I love the unique ways that all the imaginary friends bowl. We see a bit of Madame Foster's life outside of the home. Blue constantly fails to win a paddle ball out of a claw machine. It introduces Flo Jenkins, a really fun rival to Madame Foster, and Mac has one of the most relatable subplots on this list. He's very enthusiastic about bowling, but he ends up being a pretty bad bowler and only does well by accident. Just about all the cartoon characters involved with this list make rolling strikes look like the easiest thing in the world, so it's great to find a character who shares the pain and suffering I do when I step on the lane. Besides that, I also like the bowling-themed imaginary friend that Mac trains with, Bowling Paul, and the twist with him, while simple, is pretty funny. This episode definitely gets the most out of putting its characters in a bowling alley, and it does a great job capturing all of the sights and sounds of one too. This might not be the be-all, end-all of bowling episodes, but in my opinion, it's a clean strike. And that about wraps up this video. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the rest of Toon Sports Week, continuing tomorrow with some basketball over on the channel of the one and only C.R. Martin. I'm Nintendo, and remember to keep on rolling. Or should I say, keep on bowl?
Bowling is a sport that I love most to play. I dream about knocking pins down night and day. And now just between you and me, I can't get enough of the pros on TV. Watching them get strikes, frame after frame, and hoping to see a perfect game. Grab the ball.